Racism, at its core, is the belief that certain groups of people are inherently superior to others based on race or ethnicity. A closer examination reveals that it is more than just a personal prejudice. It is a system embedded in societal structures, where power, status, and privilege are allocated according to racial lines. To truly understand the essence of racism, we need to look back at periods in history where these ideas were openly manifested and institutionalized, such as during the Jim Crow era. During Jim Crow, racism wasn't subtle or hidden. It was in your face. Black people were prohibited from drinking from the same water fountains as white people, forced to sit at the back of the bus, and barred from entering public spaces that were deemed for whites only. These laws of segregation weren't just about separating people based on race. They were about maintaining a caste system, with a clear purpose of keeping black people in their place. It was not a matter of merit or character, but of reinforcing a sense of white superiority that was built into the very fabric of society. Take, for example, the educational system. No matter how qualified a black person was, no matter how high their IQ or GPA, their potential to attend a school or university could be rejected simply because of their race. Racism in this context wasn't about whether or not someone deserved a position based on their qualifications. It was about preventing any challenge to the racial hierarchy. Even highly educated black people, with credentials that would make them competitive in any field, were systematically shut out, often for no other reason than that their presence would threaten the perceived superiority of white people. This isn't just confined to education. The same was true in the job market. Black people who were more than qualified for positions were routinely passed over, not because they lacked the skills or experience, but because their presence in the workplace was viewed as a threat to the racial status quo. In fact, there are instances where black people weren't even allowed to use a community pool, despite being tax-paying citizens, simply because white people didn't want to share the space with them. This paints a stark picture of how racism, when stripped of pretenses or justifications, operates as a means of social control, ensuring that one group remains dominant. Racism, when observed in this raw form, reveals a disturbing truth. Merit and character are irrelevant. The real concern for many racist individuals isn't about the content of someone's character, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. famously envisioned, but rather about maintaining a sense of superiority. This superiority is deeply embedded in societal structures and is often reinforced through culture, social status, and even policies. It becomes a psychological mechanism for individuals who derive their self-worth from racial identity and the power that comes with it. This attachment to racial status is what drives many racial grievances. The arguments about merit, IQ, crime rates, or other supposed objective measures often serve as a smokescreen, a way to mask underlying racial resentment. These arguments are not concerned with fairness or equality but are used to provide plausible deniability to people harboring racist beliefs. This is what we see in the current backlash against initiatives like affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) programs. Proponents of these initiatives are often accused of being unfair or discriminatory in their own right, but this criticism often masks a deeper desire to preserve the racial hierarchy. To understand the nature of racism, it's helpful to consider it through the lens of sibling rivalry. In many families, there's an unspoken pecking order. The oldest sibling feels a sense of superiority over the younger siblings. If the youngest gets attention, such as a new romantic partner, it can threaten the eldest sibling's sense of self-worth. This may seem like a trivial example, but it mirrors how racism functions on a larger scale. The act of someone from a perceived lower group moving up or gaining power challenges the sense of superiority that another group holds. In this way, racism, at its most basic level, is rooted in insecurity and a desire to maintain a false sense of dominance. In conclusion, racism is not a simple matter of personal bias or the result of legitimate concerns about merit. It is about power dynamics and social control. The pushback against policies that promote diversity or affirmative action isn't grounded in objective concerns about fairness, but is a thinly veiled attempt to protect a racial hierarchy. In this sense, discussions about race often become a form of gaslighting, where the dominant group shifts the blame or deflects attention from the real issue of racial inequality. True equality cannot be achieved as long as racism, in all its forms, continues to thrive under the guise of meritocracy or other superficially appealing arguments.